At exactly 7:47 a.m. on a cold March morning, the quiet cul-de-sac of Maple Ridge Estates was lit up by the red-blue strobe of emergency lights. What looked like a standard drug raid would, within hours, unravel into one of the strangest suburban scandals in Oregon history. When SWAT teams burst through the double doors of Unit 214, the HOA administration office, they weren't expecting to find stacks of methamphetamine vacuum-sealed in folders labeled Community Beautification Funds. They weren't expecting to find 2 loaded AR-15s in a file cabinet marked bylaws violations. And most of all, they weren't expecting that the people running this office weren't real cops at all, but imposters. Fake HOA enforcers. Fake badges. Real guns. And behind it all, an elaborate drug operation, hidden in plain sight beneath the rules and rituals of suburban order. This story begins not with a raid, but with a neighbor who thought she was simply doing the right thing. Maple Ridge Estates, about 20 minutes east of Salem, was the kind of place that sold peace of mind on billboards. Curved streets lined with imported oaks, every mailbox identical, every lawn trimmed to perfection. The Homeowners Association, or HOA, wasn't just a presence. It was a law here. People joked that the HOA was stricter than the city police. A misplaced recycling bin could get you a warning letter. A faded fence panel? A $50 fine. But most residents, like Lena Brooks, thought it was worth it. Lena, a 33-year-old ER nurse and single mom, had moved into Maple Ridge 2 years earlier. Her son, Eli, was 9. Curious, bright, always riding his bike near the cul-de-sac. For a woman raising a child alone after a messy divorce, safety wasn't just a want. It was a need. The HOA promised it. So when Community Safety Patrol trucks began appearing in early 2023, Lena felt relieved. The vehicles had magnetic logos that read Maple Ridge Security Enforcement Division, and the men who drove them wore uniforms with patches that looked official enough. They carried radios, body cams, even holstered weapons. Everyone called them the HOA cops. At first, they seemed like good guys, polite, efficient, responsive. They stopped teens from vandalizing the playground, cited speeding drivers, and even helped one elderly resident carry groceries home. But then, things got strange. The leader of the so-called HOA security was a man named Caleb Knox. He looked every bit the part. Short-cropped brown hair, a confident stance, and a voice that carried authority. He'd show up at board meetings in tactical pants and say things like, "We take neighborhood safety seriously. We're authorized by the HOA board to maintain order." He wasn't lying, at least not entirely. Caleb had convinced the board that after a string of car break-ins, Maple Ridge needed its own licensed community enforcement task force. He provided business cards, certificates, even liability insurance documents. The HOA's treasurer, Paul Hendricks, had approved a monthly stipend to fund the patrol. And so, with little oversight, Caleb and his crew began operating like a private police department. Residents saw them writing citations, flashing lights, even searching vehicles parked overnight on curbs. But no one questioned it. Maple Ridge was safe, orderly, compliant, until one night in May, when a teenager named Brian Wells was pulled over by these officers for loitering. He was frisked, handcuffed, and held for over an hour in his car, without any real crime. When his parents called the local sheriff's department to complain, they were told something chilling. "We don't have any record of an HOA enforcement division, and no one named Caleb Knox is, or ever was, law enforcement." That call set off a chain reaction that would blow the lid off Maple Ridge. When the Maple County Sheriff's Department received the Wells complaint, the case was assigned to Officer Grant Meadows, a 41-year-old veteran known for his patience and persistence. Meadows had seen scams before, fake utility workers, phony contractors, but this one smelled different. His first step was simple: run a background check on the Maple Ridge Security Enforcement Division. Nothing. No business license. No tax ID. No record in the Oregon Department of Safety Registry. The address listed on their website was an empty P.O. box. Then came the kicker. The body cam footage that one resident, Toby Wells, recorded on his phone. It showed Caleb and 2 others performing what looked like a legitimate vehicle stop, but they used a fake badge resembling that of the Oregon State Patrol. The radio chatter in the clip used real police codes, but out of context, like an imitation of authenticity. When Meadows dug deeper into Caleb Knox's past, he found a record under a different name. Caleb and Rains, arrested in 2012 for possession with intent to distribute cocaine in Nevada. He'd vanished after skipping bail. Now he was back, running a suburban drug operation under guise of an HOA. Behind the polished exterior, Caleb's security division was more than just a front. It was logistics. Under the cover of HOA patrols, Caleb's team transported packages across county lines, hidden in community maintenance trucks. Landscaping most deliveries contained not just fertilizer, but kilograms of meth, disguised in sealed plastic under fake invoices. The drugs came from a distribution ring based in Portland. The buyers were middle-tier dealers in smaller towns. Maple Ridge was a perfect hub. Quiet, respectable, invisible to suspicion. Even the HOA board unknowingly enabled it. The beautification fund they approved was being laundered to cover gas receipts, uniforms, and equipment fees. Caleb's partner inside the board, Treasurer Paul Hendricks, signed every check. Paul wasn't a hardened criminal, just a desperate man. His accounting firm was collapsing under debt. Caleb had promised him a 20% cut if he kept the books clean. But not everyone on the board was complicit. Marla Jensen, the HOA secretary, noticed small inconsistencies. Checks cashed under new account names, unexplained invoices from Knox Safety Solutions. When she asked Caleb for clarification, he smiled and said, "You don't want to get bogged down in the security stuff. It's need to know." That phrase stuck with her. She began keeping copies of board minutes and transaction records at home. When she confided in Evelyn Marks, the HOA vice president, Evelyn brushed her off, insisting that Caleb was doing good work and that rumors undermined morale. So Marla went silent publicly, but she called Officer Meadows privately. "I think something's very wrong here," she said in a trembling voice. "And if I'm right, it's not just embezzlement. It's bigger." That call, recorded and logged on June 4th, became the first documented whistleblower report in the Maple Ridge drug investigation. By July, Meadows had authorization for covert surveillance. He placed 2 unmarked units near the Maple Ridge HOA office and installed motion-activated cameras at both neighborhood exits. For weeks, nothing unusual happened until August 12th. At 3:11 a.m., a security truck left the HOA compound. GPS tagged its route as heading south toward Hubbard Industrial Park, where it parked for 12 minutes before returning. The next day, a shipment of community maintenance supplies arrived, 25 sealed bags of fertilizer and soil. No one in the neighborhood recalled requesting landscaping work. A lab test confirmed what Meadows suspected. Methamphetamine, 98% pure. That was the breakthrough. But before he could make arrests, something unexpected happened. Someone tipped Caleb off. It was late August when Caleb abruptly shut down the patrol operation, telling the board the HOA was transitioning to a new contractor. The trucks disappeared. So did the man. Within days, Paul Hendricks withdrew $40,000 from the HOA account and vanished. Marla Jensen received a threatening anonymous letter. "Stop asking questions or you'll regret it." Officer Meadows realized the investigation had sprung a leak. Someone inside the sheriff's office or the HOA had alerted the suspects. The FBI was called in for assistance. Then, 2 weeks later, Lena Brooks made a call that changed everything. At 10:42 p.m., dispatch received a panicked 911 call from Lena. "There's someone outside. He's in a uniform. He says he's with HOA enforcement, but they were supposed to be gone. He's knocking on my door, saying he needs to check my backyard for a gas leak. Please hurry, my son's here." The caller's voice was steady but terrified. When deputies arrived, they found the front door slightly open and Lena hiding in the hallway, clutching Eli. The man was gone. Outside, tire tracks led to nearby service road. But there was something else. A dropped radio transmitter. When analyzed, it contained a single message log. "Dispatch. Lot 19 is clean. No product here." That line confirmed Meadows' worst fear. Lena's home had been mistaken for a stash house. By September, with federal support, Meadows secured a joint operation warrant. At 2:47 a.m. on September 14th, officers raided the Maple Ridge HOA office, the supposed nerve center of the fake police unit. They expected paperwork. Instead, they found chaos, hidden compartments, burned documents, bags of methamphetamine stored in filing cabinets, 2 unregistered rifles, and in the back room, an entire wall covered in HOA maps, each home marked with colored stickers indicating safe, active, or deliver. The operation wasn't small time, it was regional, and the man behind it, Caleb Knox, was nowhere to be found. News broke within hours. Fake HOA cops busted in drug ring became a statewide headline. Residents were stunned. How had they not noticed? How had fake officers operated in their midst for over a year? For Lena, the shock turned to paranoia. She began noticing strange cars parked across the street, unfamiliar faces at the grocery store. Eli had nightmares about men knocking on the door. Marla Jensen entered witness protection after a break-in attempt at her home. Paul Hendricks' car was later found abandoned near the Columbia River. Driver's side window shattered, keys still in ignition. No sign of him was ever found. As for Caleb Knox, he vanished into thin air. The last known sighting was 2 days after the raid, captured by a gas station camera near Redding, California. He was clean-shaven, wearing a ball cap, and driving a rental SUV with fake plates. The FBI classified him as armed and dangerous. But what investigators didn't yet realize was that Caleb wasn't just running from the law. He was covering up something much darker. 3 months after the raid, new evidence surfaced. A thumb drive recovered from one of the seized patrol trucks. On it were encrypted messages between Caleb and an unknown contact identified only as MC. Decoded fragments included references to Shipment B, route clearance, and chillingly, HOA project continuation under new banner. The implication was clear. The operation wasn't dead. It was regrouping. Officer Meadows suspected MC might be someone still inside Maple Ridge. Someone powerful enough to keep the neighborhood quiet. Then, one night in late December, Meadows received an unmarked envelope on his windshield. Inside was a single photograph. A group of men in security uniforms, standing in front of the newly reopened HOA office. Caleb was among them, except, according to the timestamp, the photo was taken 2 weeks ago. That night, Meadows sat in his car, staring at the photo. The fluorescent glow of the streetlights shimmered across the image. The men looked calm, confident, untouchable. The address on the envelope wasn't Maple Ridge anymore. It was another subdivision, 20 miles north, Pinewood Hills. And beneath the photograph, scrawled in block letters, were 3 words. It never ended. Meadows' hand tightened around the photo. He looked out across the quiet suburb, every porch light flickering like nothing had happened. But deep down, he knew the truth. What he'd stumbled upon wasn't a local scam. It was a network, a system, and Maple Ridge was only the beginning. As he started the engine, his radio crackled. The dispatcher's voice still echoed in Officer Grant Meadows' head as he hit the gas pedal. Unit 7, we got another 911 call. Men in uniforms claiming HOA authority. Address, Pinewood Hills, Lot 22. He didn't need to check the map. He knew Pinewood Hills, another planned community just 20 miles north of Maple Ridge. Same developer, same bylaws, same HOA model. When his headlights swept over the manicured lawns and cookie-cutter porches, a chill crept down his spine. The place looked identical to Maple Ridge. As if the past 6 months had been reset, brick for brick, illusion for illusion. And there, under the street lamp at the end of Lot 22, he saw it. A black SUV with HOA Enforcement Division decals. The same logo. The same badge design. It wasn't over. It had simply moved. The call had come from Janet Cole, president of the Pinewood Hills Homeowners Association. A woman in her 50s, sharp as glass. Every strand of her platinum bob perfectly aligned. When Meadows arrived, she met him at the door in her robe, trembling but defiant. They said they were with the Regional Compliance Task Force, she said. They had paperwork with the HOA logo, said they were here to check for unauthorized basement renovations. I told them to get off my property. Did they show ID? Meadows asked. She nodded. Badges. Looked official. They even had body cams. Meadows stepped inside, scanning the entryway. How many? 2 men, 1 woman. They left when I called 911. He looked out the front window. The SUV was gone, but the timing chilled him. The Pinewood Hills HOA had just reinstated its neighborhood safety program, funded by the same private company listed in Maple Ridge's old contracts. Knox Safety Solutions, LLC. Caleb's company, reborn under a different name. 2 days later, Meadows and federal agent Miguel Ortiz met at a cafe off Highway 22. Ortiz was a state inspector who'd helped dismantle the Maple Ridge operation. He was methodical, skeptical, and wore the same high-vis jacket even off duty. Ortiz slid a folder across the table. Knox Safety Solutions refiled under a new address last month. Registered agent is a woman named Dr. Alyssa Coleman. Meadows frowned. The EPA agent from the old case? Ortiz nodded. The one who turned out to be a fake EPA agent. She's back, and now she's a public face of a community compliance firm, working with half a dozen HOAs in the county. So Caleb's not just hiding, he's expanding, Meadows said. Exactly. This isn't a single neighborhood operation anymore. This is a corporate network. Property management, HOA oversight, even environmental compliance. Everything looks legal on paper, but it's the perfect cover. Ortiz leaned in. They're building something bigger. Maybe regional. Meadows stared at the folder. This time, we take it apart from the top. When the FBI began their quiet surveillance of Pinewood Hills, they found more than expected. The compliance patrols operated on a strict schedule, 10 p.m. to 2 a.m., alternating between neighborhoods. Their vehicles shared a GPS pattern eerily similar to those from Maple Ridge, and the HOA board president, Janet Cole, seemed almost complicit. Her emails to Dr. Alyssa Coleman were cryptic. The shipments arrived earlier than expected. We'll secure them in the community center until Thursday. The residents on Lot 9 and 14 have expressed concerns. I'll take care of it. She wasn't just a victim. She was part of it. Meadows pieced it together with a mixture of disgust and fascination. Janet wasn't being duped. She was a partner, using HOA structures to move product through legitimate contractor invoices. The scheme was simple yet ingenious. Drugs disguised as community supplies. Landscaping bags, fertilizer, paint drums, all invoiced as HOA materials. Distribution via patrol units. The security officers made late-night deliveries to pre-approved homes. Money laundering through fines and dues. Inflated violation fees and compliance surcharges funneled cash into shell companies. It was suburban crime at its most sophisticated, polite, paper trail clean, and operating under the illusion of order. Meadows' first face-to-face with Dr. Alyssa Coleman came during a public HOA safety conference at the Pinewood Hills Clubhouse. She was speaking on stage, poised, articulate, wearing a crisp gray suit and that same counterfeit EPA badge now repurposed as a regional compliant authority insignia. Our goal, she told the crowd, is to empower communities to self-regulate. We don't need more government oversight. We need proactive enforcement. Her tone was calm, confident, and chillingly familiar. When the session ended, Meadows approached her, posing as a potential client. I represent a new HOA near Silverton, he said. We're looking for a firm to handle code compliance. You come highly recommended. She smiled, perfect teeth, cool green eyes. We're very selective with our partnerships, Officer Meadows. He froze. He hadn't given his name. She leaned in. You didn't think we forgot about Maple Ridge, did you? And then she walked away, heels clicking against the marble floor, leaving him staring after her in stunned silence. She knew exactly who he was, and that meant she was watching. Back at the sheriff's department, Meadows vented his frustration to Ortiz. She's taunting us. She knows we can't touch her unless we have physical evidence. Ortiz nodded. Then we get it, but not through her. Enter Howard Kane, a soft-spoken former Maple Ridge homeowner who'd been quietly following the news since the raid. He came forward with a tip. He'd been approached by a man offering to restore his lost property title in exchange for silence. The man's name? Paul Hendricks. The same treasure who'd vanished months ago now resurfaced. According to Howard, Paul looked rough, paranoid. He'd admitted the truth. After the Maple Ridge bust, Caleb had gone underground and rebuilt through Dr. Coleman's company. The drug still moved through HOA routes, but now under new branding and tighter control. Paul claimed he wanted out, but he also hinted at something bigger. It's not just Caleb, he told Howard. There's someone funding it, a developer, someone high up. Before he could say more, he disappeared again. The breakthrough came from an unlikely source, a young resident named Toby Wells, the same guy who'd filmed the fake officers months earlier in Maple Ridge. He'd recently moved to Pinewood Hills with his fiancée, unaware of its connection to the past. When he recognized the patrol trucks, he contacted Meadows directly. They're running the same game here, he said. Only this time they got tech, drones, cameras, even QR-coded citations. He sent footage showing a patrol team unloading boxes labeled community outreach kits behind the HOA clubhouse at midnight. Inside one of the boxes, vacuum-sealed packages with the same heat stamps used in Caleb's old stash. That was the evidence they needed. The FBI greenlit a second raid. But what happened next turned the operation on its head. The raid was scheduled for 3 a.m., quiet, surgical, no leaks. But as the tactical unit rolled into Pinewood Hills, the streetlights suddenly went dark. Then came the first explosion. A patrol truck burst into flames near the clubhouse gate. Officers ducked for cover as rounds cracked through the air. It wasn't a raid anymore. It was an ambush. Someone had been tipped off again. Through the smoke, Meadows caught a glimpse of a figure fleeing toward the woods. Tall, wearing tactical gear, radio earpiece glinting under the firelight. "Caleb!" he shouted, sprinting after him. The chase cut through the pine trees, flashlight beams slicing the darkness. Meadows' breath burned in his lungs, his boots slipping on wet soil. Ahead, the figure crashed through branches, until suddenly, silence. Then out of the shadows, a voice. "You don't understand, Grant. You're chasing the wrong people." Meadows froze. "Show yourself." The voice laughed. Maple Ridge was just a test. A flash, and then the sound of a motorcycle roaring away. When officers swept the area, they found only tire marks and a discarded radio. On the frequency looped one repeated phrase. Phase 2 initiated. The ambush turned the Pinewood Hills case into a national story. The FBI released partial details, suburban cartel fronts, HOA infiltration, missing funds. News outlets dubbed it the neighborhood narcos. But behind closed doors, the situation was spiraling. For officers were injured. The clubhouse was destroyed. The HOA dissolved overnight. Yet no one, not Caleb, not Dr. Coleman, not Janet Cole, had been arrested. Every suspect had gone dark. Meanwhile, the surviving residents were left to pick up the pieces. Lena Brooks, who had since moved out of Maple Ridge, was interviewed by local media. "They were supposed to protect us," she said, eyes heavy. "But all they did was use our trust." Her testimony reignited public anger and pressure on the department to act. But Meadows knew this wasn't over. In fact, it was getting personal. A month later, a small envelope arrived at Meadows' desk. No return address. Inside, a USB drive labeled for Grant. The video began with static, then a flickering frame. Paul Hendricks, sitting in a motel room, unshaven, exhausted. "If you're watching this, I'm probably dead," he said. "Caleb's not who you think he is. None of them are. The HOA thing, it's just a shell. The real money's in property development, land acquisition, rezoning. They use fake enforcement to scare people into selling, then flip the land for millions." He leaned closer to the camera. "The man funding it all, the one behind Caleb Coleman, all of them, his name is Arthur M. Coleman. He's Alyssa's brother. CEO of Coleman Environmental. He's laundering everything through federal contracts." Paul took a shaky breath. "Find Arthur. He's the reason Maple Ridge happened. He's the reason I can't sleep." Then the screen went black. Meadows' stomach twisted. Arthur M. Coleman wasn't just a corporate name. He'd met him months earlier during a county development hearing. Arthur had shaken his hand. To expose Arthur, Meadows and Ortiz needed proof. They created a sting, a fake HOA board meeting in a newly built community called Sunvale Park, posing as potential clients for Knox Safety Solutions. The goal: lure Arthur's operatives into discussing transport routes on camera. For 2 hours, nothing happened. Then a black sedan pulled up. Out stepped Dr. Alyssa Coleman, and behind her, a man in a charcoal suit with silver streaked hair. Arthur M. Coleman. The meeting began smoothly. Coleman smiled, confident. Our model integrates environmental compliance with community oversight, a turnkey solution. Ortiz pressed him. And the security aspect? You still use private patrols. Coleman's smile thinned. We prefer the term neighborhood liaison. Then, casually, Meadows said, Interesting. So you handle enforcement, supply, and zoning, all under one contract. Coleman's eyes flickered. Who exactly did you say you were? That was the cue. FBI agents swarmed the building. But before they could cuff him, Coleman simply smiled and pressed a button on his watch. A small explosion rocked the side of the building. Smoke poured through the vents. By the time they cleared it, both Colemans were gone. All that remained was a printed blueprint, scorched at the edges, titled Project Sunvale Initiative Phase 3 Expansion. The fallout was chaos. Congressional hearings, lawsuits, and conspiracy forums exploded online. The FBI confirmed that the Colemans and Caleb Knox were part of a sophisticated trafficking network using HOAs as smokescreens. Their operations stretched across 3 states. But the deeper Meadows dug, the more he realized the rot went higher. County officials had approved fake inspection permits. Law enforcement databases had been altered. Someone powerful was clearing paths for these compliance firms. And then, unexpectedly, a text arrived from an unknown number. If you want the truth, come alone. Tonight, Lot 19. Lot 19, Lena Brooks' old house. When Meadows arrived, the neighborhood was silent. The house had been sold, boarded up, moonlight glinted off the windows. He approached slowly, gun drawn. Inside, dust covered the floors, but someone had been there recently. Footprints, coffee cups, a map spread across the kitchen table. In the corner, a laptop playing security footage. Live feeds from multiple neighborhoods, Pinewood Hills, Sunvale Park, and others. Then a voice behind him. You were never supposed to see this. Meadows turned. Standing in the doorway, bruised, older, but unmistakably him. Caleb Knox. You think you stopped us? Caleb said, smirking. You just trimmed one branch. Meadows raised his weapon. Drop it. But Caleb shook his head. You have no idea who you're really fighting. They own everything now, the land, the boards, the cops, even you. He tossed the file onto the floor. Inside were documents bearing a chilling logo, the Sunvale Initiative, lists of properties, HOA names, federal approval stamps, and a single page marked Phase 3 National Integration. Before Meadows could react, headlights flared outside. Black SUVs surrounded the house. Caleb backed away, shouting over sound. You can't stop what's already in motion. A shot rang out. Glass shattered. When Meadows regained focus, Caleb was gone. Outside, the SUVs were disappearing down the road. Later that night, Meadows sat alone in his car, staring at the documents Caleb had left behind. Every file, every signature, every seal was legitimate. The Sunvale Initiative wasn't a road plan. It was federally contracted, meaning someone in Washington had authorized it. He picked up his phone, dialing Ortiz. Miguel, it's not just Oregon. It's national. They're using HOAs to move product and property under government funding. Static. Then Ortiz's voice came through, shaken. Grant, I can't talk. They're here. Who? No response. Only the faint sound of a door breaking open, and then silence. Meadows sat frozen, realization flooding in. It wasn't just an operation anymore. It was a cover-up. He looked out the windshield and froze. A black SUV was parked across the street, engine idling. Inside, a figure in a gray suit watching him through tinted glass. Then his phone buzzed again. A text message appeared. We warned you. Phase 3 begins tomorrow. And as he stepped out into the cold night, red-blue lights flashing in the distance, one thought echoed through his mind. If this is only Phase 3, what the hell was Phase 1 really about? The morning of August 18th began like any other in Maple Ridge Estates. Humid, thick with the scent of rain-soaked pine and distant lawnmowers. But by 9:47 a.m., the neighborhood's calm fractured. A fisherman named Carl Bender spotted something floating in the narrow irrigation canal that wound behind the cul-de-sac. At first, he thought it was a bag of trash or maybe a fallen tarp. Then he saw a hand. By the time Officer Grant Meadows arrived, the canal had drawn a crowd. HOA residents stood behind yellow tape, whispering and craning for a glimpse. The body was half submerged, tangled in reeds. Face down, wearing what looked like a black tactical vest, emblazoned with the letters MR Security. Grant's jaw clenched. That was the same vest worn by the so-called fake HOA cops. The coroner confirmed later, Kyle Trent, 29 years old, was dead. A single bullet wound to the base of the skull. The news rippled through the town. To most, Kyle was a familiar nuisance, one of the security volunteers hired unofficially by the Maple Ridge HOA. But to Grant and State Inspector Miguel Ortiz, who'd been quietly investigating the HOA's off-books enforcement arm, this was the first corpse in a case already teetering on the edge of exposure. And it meant someone within the operation was cleaning house. The break came when Nora Klein, the local investigative reporter, received a late-night message through an encrypted app. It was from an anonymous whistleblower claiming to be inside the HOA security unit. The message was simple. You want to know where the shipments go? Check the old lumber warehouse off Route 19. Back entrance, Tuesday after midnight. Nora's pulse raced. She'd been digging for weeks, following HOA budget discrepancies and unaccounted fuel invoices. Every lead pointed toward something bigger than petty power abuse. At 12:17 a.m., she parked her van behind a chain-link fence near the warehouse. Through her zoom lens, she caught it. 2 black SUVs pulling up to the loading dock. 4 men got out, dressed in the same black MR security uniforms. They carried duffel bags, heavy, deliberate. One of them, she realized with a shock, was Paul Hendricks, the HOA treasurer. Nora filmed everything. The next morning, she showed the footage to Grant and Ortiz. Together, they went to the warehouse, but by the time they arrived, the place was spotless. Empty crates, white fingerprints, nothing but the smell of diesel and bleach. Whoever had been running the operation knew they were being watched. As the task force expanded, a disturbing pattern emerged. Every time they planned a raid or surveillance run, the suspects vanished hours beforehand. There was a leak. Grant began to suspect someone within local law enforcement, or even within his own department, was feeding intel to the HOA's shadow network. The suspicion turned personal when Grant found an unmarked envelope on his car windshield one night. Inside, a USB drive. The footage on it chilled him. It was from his own body cam feed. Footage that was supposed to be secured on a police server. Someone had hacked into evidence storage. The video had been edited to make it look like Grant himself was accepting a bribe from a known dealer. He knew then the leak wasn't just inside the HOA. It was inside the sheriff's department. He was being framed. Meanwhile, Evelyn Marks, the HOA vice president, began to unravel. Once the face of neighborhood order, she now jumped at shadows. She'd stopped attending board meetings, claiming health reasons. When Nora cornered her outside her home for comment, Evelyn's hands trembled. "You don't understand," she said quietly. "They're not who they say they are. The uniforms, the badges, it's just cover. The HOA was a shell from the start. They needed a place to move product, to clean the money. And now they're turning on each other." "Who's they?" Nora pressed. Evelyn hesitated, glancing toward the street. A black SUV crawled by, its tinted windows glinting in the afternoon sun. She lowered her voice. "Check Coleman Environmental." Everything started with them. Before Nora could ask more, Evelyn stepped back and shut the door. That night, Evelyn's house burned to ground. The official cause, electrical fault. But Grant, watching the flames eat through the wreckage, knew better. Arthur M. Coleman, CEO of Coleman Environmental, was a man who'd built his fortune on public-private contracts and clean energy grants. On paper, he was untouchable. But Ortiz's record search told a different story. Multiple shell companies, all funneling consulting payments to the Maple Ridge HOA over the past 3 years. The amounts were staggering. Worse, Coleman's private construction sites aligned perfectly with GPS pings from the fake security patrol cars. They weren't guarding property. They were escorting shipments. The drugs, meth and fentanyl, were being smuggled inside construction material shipments. Bags of powder sealed inside concrete mix. The HOA's maintenance trucks were picking up the deliveries, blending them into suburban legitimacy. Grant stared at the evidence, bored in disbelief. "This isn't some local ring," he muttered. "This is organized." Nora nodded. "And it's statewide." Days later, Nora received a chilling warning. Her editor called in panic. Someone had broken into the station's office. Every hard drive containing the warehouse footage was gone. An hour later, an edited version of her video appeared online, on a conspiracy site, claiming she was part of the cover-up. The footage had been spliced, her voice manipulated to sound complicit. It was a smear campaign. Someone wanted her discredited before she could publish the truth. Grant met her in a diner that night. She was pale, exhausted. "They're not just laundering drugs," she whispered. "They're laundering trust. They build these HOAs, these fake layers of authority, so no one questions when a man with a badge knocks on your door." Grant looked at her, jaw tight. "Then we knocked back." Ortiz finally secured a warrant for one of Coleman's distribution sites, a fenced property marked as Greenhab Reclamation Facility. They planned a dawn raid, coordinating local units and DEA backup. But something went wrong. As the convoy approached, the facility exploded. A controlled detonation, remote triggered. The blast ripped through the warehouse, sending fireballs into the gray dawn sky. 3 officers were injured. The rest barely escaped. Ortiz, coughing through smoke, stared at the wreckage. Every trace of evidence gone, burned to ash. Then his phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. "Stop digging, Miguel. You're next." He turned to Grant. "They knew we were coming." In the chaos that followed, one man quietly stepped forward. Mr. Dorsey, a longtime resident who'd lived in Maple Ridge since before the HOA even existed. He asked to speak privately with Grant and Nora. In his small, neat living room, he revealed an old shoebox filled with letters, maps, and photos. "You're looking at the wrong decade," he said. "Coleman's been using this land for years, long before Maple Ridge was built." He spread the documents on the table. Satellite maps from the 1990s, old construction blueprints, hidden service tunnels connecting the subdivision to the old irrigation network, the same canal where Kyle Trent's body was found. "Those tunnels," he said quietly, "were built for water management, but they've been moving something else through them for years." Nora felt her throat tighten. "You mean the drugs?" Dorsey nodded. "And sometimes people." Lena Brooks, the ER nurse and single mother, had mostly kept her distance from the drama, until one of her patients changed everything. A young man was brought into her ER, unconscious from an overdose. When she checked his wallet, she found an HOA security badge. Before the paramedics wheeled him away, he grabbed her wrist weakly and whispered something. "The vault under lot 23. Lena didn't know what it meant, but when she told Grant, his blood ran cold. Lot 23 had been vacant for months, an empty foundation, supposedly stalled by permit issues. That night, Grant, Ortiz, and Nora drove out under cover of darkness. They pried open a half-poured concrete slab. Beneath it, an access hatch. When they opened it, the stench of chemical fumes hit them. Inside was a hidden room, lined with bricks of white powder, weapons, and counterfeit HOA documents. The operations nerve center. But there was something else, a map marked with red circles. Grant traced one with his flashlight beam. "These aren't distribution points," he said. "They're neighborhoods." Each circle represented another HOA across the state. Word of the find spread fast. Too fast. By dawn, the site was crawling with unmarked vehicles. Grant was ordered to stand down, replaced by a federal task force he'd never heard of. When he demanded credentials, the agents flashed badges, EPA, DA, even Homeland Security. But Ortiz, checking the IDs later, found half of them didn't exist. Fake federal agents. Again, the same network, wearing another mask. Nora tried to record them, but one agent sees her camera. "This is classified," he said coldly. "You're interfering in a federal operation." By nightfall, the vault was sealed and bulldozed over. Official record: hazardous chemical contamination. Case closed. Grant knew better. Someone high up was protecting Coleman. 2 nights later, Ortiz failed to show up for their scheduled debrief. His motel room was empty, no signs of struggle, but his files, laptop, and phone were gone. Grant searched every contact. Nothing. Then Nora received a text from Ortiz's number. Just one line: "Don't trust anyone in uniform." Attached was a photo, grainy, dark. It showed the inside of a van. Ortiz was handcuffed, eyes wide, bruised. Behind him stood a man in an HOA security vest and another in a sheriff's jacket. Grant's heart dropped. Someone from his own department was part of it. Days later, while sorting through Ortiz's confiscated materials, Nora found a small flash drive hidden inside a hollow pen. It was encrypted, but the folder name was clear: Project Sunshine. Inside were documents connecting Coleman Environmental to a massive redevelopment project across multiple suburban HOAs. Each HOA had identical bylaws, identical community safety units, and identical shell accounts routing money through offshore subsidiaries. It wasn't a coincidence. It was a system. Grant realized the fake HOA cops were just one piece of a vast operation. A network of front organizations used to launder money, traffic drugs, and manipulate local enforcement through false authority. And now, the entire system was at risk of exposure. Late one night, Grant's phone rang. Unknown number. A voice said quietly, "You're digging in the wrong place. Coleman isn't the top. He's just management." "Who are you?" Grant demanded. Silence. Then, they called the initiative. "You were never supposed to see the tunnels. Ortiz got too close. Don't make his mistake." The line went dead. Minutes later, Nora's car alarm went off outside. Her windows had been smashed, and taped to the steering wheel was a photo. Her, Grant, and Lena outside Lot 23. Across it, scrawled in red marker, "Next." The next morning, news broke. Arthur Coleman had vanished. His private jet had taken off from a small airstrip outside Pinewood Hills. Destination unknown. The plane's transponder was later found dismantled in a field near the state border. Grant stood in the sheriff's office, staring at the map pinned to the wall. Red circles for every fake HOA, every town infected by the operation. He could feel it, the scale of what they were up against. It wasn't a few bad cops. It was an empire. Outside, thunder rolled. The storm was coming. As he turned off the lights and locked his office, a faint hum came from the hallway. Someone had left the security monitors running. On one of the screens, a live feed of the station's parking lot, Grant saw a black SUV idling in the rain. The same model used by the fake HOA cops. Then, slowly, its headlights blinked twice as if signaling. Grant reached for his weapon, and the screen went black. 3 days after the SUV sighting, Officer Grant Meadows went missing. His patrol car was found abandoned just outside Maple Ridge Estates. The engine still warm, headlights on, driver's door ajar. Inside, his badge lay on the dashboard, but his weapon and phone were gone. The last known security footage captured him, leaving the sheriff's department at 10:37 p.m. alone. Calm, determined. What no one saw was the unmarked van that followed him 5 minutes later. When the call came through dispatch, the town fell silent. Rumors spread faster than facts. Some said Grant fled, afraid of what he'd uncovered. Others whispered darker theories, that the same people who took Inspector Ortiz had come for him. To Nora Klein, the truth didn't matter. What mattered was that Grant had been right. The operation wasn't local. It was everywhere. And now, it was silencing anyone who got close. It began as a press conference. A woman identified herself as Dr. Alyssa Coleman, Environmental Compliance Director, EPA Region 6, stepped before the cameras. She offered condolences to the tragic industrial explosion that had destroyed the Greenhab facility, praising law enforcement for their swift and professional containment efforts. But to Nora, watching the broadcast from her living room, the woman's face was instantly familiar. She wasn't a federal agent. She was Arthur Coleman's sister, and the same imposter who'd shown up months earlier pretending to be an EPA inspector. Now she stood before national cameras, rewriting the story. The situation in Maple Ridge, she said, was a result of illegal chemical dumping by rogue employees. Coleman Environmental remains committed to transparency and community safety. It was a masterpiece of deception, turning a drug operation into an environmental scandal. And the country bought it. 2 weeks later, Nora got a call from an unknown number. A man's voice rasped, "He's alive." "Who?" she demanded. "Grant Meadows." The call ended abruptly, but a text followed. "Abandoned mill, North Ridge. Midnight." Against her better judgment, she went. The mill was half collapsed, rusted beams piercing through broken skylights. The wind howled through empty spaces. And then, a flashlight beam flickered in the dark. Grant stepped out, thinner, bruised, his face gaunt but eyes burning. "They tried to break me," he said quietly. "Didn't work." He told her everything. The van, the interrogation, the warehouse where they'd taken him. A facility disguised as a community training center. He'd been kept there for days, questioned by men in tactical uniforms without insignia. They wanted to know what he'd found on Ortiz's drive. They kept saying the same word. Grant whispered. Initiative. The drive, the one Nora had hidden after Ortiz's disappearance, became the key. Together, she and Grant decrypted the remaining folders. What they uncovered changed everything. The initiative, officially named the Sunshine Redevelopment Partnership, was a state-backed pilot program designed to revitalize suburban infrastructure. Dozens of HOAs had signed up, lured by Grant's new roads and safety patrols. But behind the paperwork, the program was a front. The funding came from shell corporations tied to Coleman Environmental, which in turn laundered money from drug shipments moving through construction supply chains. Each HOA served as a micro-distribution cell, disguised as neighborhood improvement projects. Landscaping budgets hid fuel costs. Maintenance trucks hid deliveries. Homeowners unknowingly paid fees that supported organized crime. And the security patrols? Recruited from off-duty or disgraced officers, given fake authority, and used as muscle. The program wasn't a scam. It was an ecosystem, one that had thrived in plain sight. Grant and Nora took the files to the state attorney's office in Capital City. But within hours, the attorney they met with, a man named Rutherford, was reassigned. The case was transferred to federal jurisdiction. Then the folder disappeared. A week later, Nora's article exposing the fake HOA network was abruptly pulled from her news outlet's website. Her editor, red-eyed, told her there were national security implications. She was suspended for unauthorized disclosure of classified material. The truth had hit a wall of silence. Grant knew then the rot went higher than Coleman. It went government deep. Meanwhile, Lena Brooks couldn't stay silent anymore. She'd seen too much. The overdoses, the patrol cars that never responded when she called for help, the strange trucks that passed through at night. So she spoke. She organized a neighborhood meeting at the community center, inviting residents to share their experiences. To her surprise, dozens came. Homeowners from Maple Ridge, Pinewood Hills, and nearby developments, all telling the same story. Fake citations, illegal fines, missing pets, surveillance cameras that weren't theirs. "I thought it was just us," one man said, voice trembling. "But it's all of us." Lena nodded. "That's how they win, by making each of us feel alone." Her courage sparked something. Within days, the story began spreading across social media, forcing local news to pick it up again. But the pushback came fast. A cease and desist letter arrived from Sunshine Redevelopment Legal. It claimed Lena was defaming a federally supported program. Then one night, she found a brick through her window and a note wrapped around it. Stay in your lane, nurse. The following week, Mr. Dorsey showed up at Nora's door, cane tapping against the wood. His eyes were heavy with something unspoken. They came by my place, he said softly. 2 men. Said they were from zoning. Asked about the old tunnels. Nora frowned. What did you tell them? He sighed. I told them the truth, that those tunnels aren't for water anymore. They're for secrets. And secrets don't drown easy. He handed her a manila envelope. Inside was a faded photograph, black and white, dated 1998. It showed the original Maple Ridge construction team, including a younger Arthur Coleman and a man in a sheriff's jacket. Grant leaned closer. His stomach twisted. The man wasn't just any sheriff. It was his former boss, the same one who'd sign off every HOA permit in the region. The corruption had started decades earlier. That night, Mr. Dorsey's house caught fire. The report said accidental gas leak. But Nora didn't believe in coincidences anymore. Out of options, Nora decided to go public all the way. She used her old press connections to set up an independent live broadcast, streaming from an undisclosed location. Grant stood beside her, visibly worn but resolute. On camera, she laid it out piece by piece. The fake security units, the tunnels, the laundering through Coleman Environmental, the connection to government redevelopment contracts. Then she showed the documents, the ones she and Grant had verified from Ortiz's Drive. The stream went live for 17 minutes. At minute 18, the feed cut to black. The screen flashed, content removed for violation of national security protocols. Her channel was deleted. Her laptop froze. And within the hour, her name began trending, not as a journalist, but as a domestic disinformation agent. They had turned the truth into a lie again. Grant received an anonymous message later that night. A location. Coordinates in the forest near the old canal, where it had all begun. Against every instinct, he went. There, under the pale wash of a full moon, stood Arthur Coleman, alive, calm, smiling faintly. Officer Meadows, he said, voice even. I told them you'd come. Grant raised his weapon. Where's Ortiz? Coleman's smile didn't waver. He's gone. The initiative has no use for martyrs. What are you running, Coleman? A drug ring? A militia? Coleman chuckled. You still think so small. Drugs are just the surface. We manage control. Economic, territorial, psychological. The HOA model was the perfect laboratory. Everyone polices themselves. Everyone signs their own consent. Grant's grip tightened. You killed people. No, Coleman said softly. We replaced them. Then headlights flashed from the tree line. Black SUVs surrounded them. Men stepped out, dressed in tactical gear, silent as ghosts. Grant fired once, hitting a tire. Then another flash. Pain. Darkness. When Grant awoke, he was in a hospital bed, hooked to IVs. His side burned. Nora sat beside him, eyes swollen from crying. They found you near the canal, she whispered. Barely alive. Coleman's gone. Gone. His plane crashed. Or that's what they're saying. She handed him a sealed envelope. It had been in his jacket. When they found him, inside was a single flash drive, marked only with one word. Truth. Nora plugged it in. The screen displayed a video, surveillance footage from an unknown location. Rows of containers, each labeled with the logo of a different HOA. Then a timestamp, dated 2 days after Coleman's supposed death. He wasn't dead. The operation was still alive. Grant looked at her, voice hoarse. We didn't end it. We just found the edge. A month later, Nora vanished. Her apartment was found empty, laptop smashed, hard drives missing. On her kitchen table sat a note in her handwriting. If you're reading this, it means I got too close. Keep looking. Trust no one. N. Grant never saw her again. Some said she fled the country. Others believed she was silenced like Ortiz. But every so often, new files surface online. Detailed leaks exposing another community safety program. Another HOA gone dark. Someone was still fighting back. Maple Ridge never recovered. The HOA dissolved quietly, replaced by a private management firm with no public accountability. Coleman Environmental rebranded. Grants resumed. And life went on, perfectly manicured, perfectly silent. Grant left the force 6 months later. He moved into a small cabin by the state border. Every so often, unmarked cars would park near his driveway for a few hours, then leave, watching, waiting. He knew they hadn't forgotten. Yet, he also knew something else. The truth never dies quietly. It seeps through cracks, through whispers, through ordinary people who dare to question what's normal. Because that was a lesson of Maple Ridge. Evil doesn't always wear a mask. Sometimes it wears a badge, a logo, a neighbor's smile. In the end, one question remains, one that Grant wrote in his final journal entry before disappearing himself. If the systems we trust, our neighborhoods, our police, our institutions, can be built on lies as convincing, how will we ever know when we're living inside one? And beneath it, in smaller letters, check who's watching your street tonight. Moral lesson. Corruption doesn't need to hide in the dark when the world has learned to mistake control for safety. When communities trade vigilance for comfort, the predators don't have to invade. They just need to organize. So the question is, would you notice that the people enforcing your rules weren't real cops? Or would you obey them anyway?